Okay, so we're gonna make kind of the classic macaroni and cheese recipe from the Fannie Farmer cookbook. And I believe that this mac and cheese recipe is, you know, kind of like one of the older American recipes, and I think pretty much all the modern macaroni and cheese, you know, creamy macaroni and cheese the way we know it, pretty much comes from this recipe. So, you know, no frills, and definitely not health food, but ultra creamy, ultra rich, and very delicious. So we're gonna start with a whole stick of butter. So that's 8 ounces of butter. And what we're gonna do here first, which is typical when you're making any kind of mac and cheese, is we're gonna make a roux. And a roux is just when you take flour. So I have 8 tablespoons of flour mixed with 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt and about a teaspoon of ground black pepper. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna basically cook this flour in fat, which in this case is the butter. And when we do that, we're gonna make something called a roux, and that's basically gonna be the thickening agent for the cheese sauce that we're gonna make, which is gonna go over the macaroni and make our macaroni and cheese. So really the first thing we gotta do is we just wait for the butter to melt. And if you come over here, I'll show you what else I have. So I've got a 9 by 13 inch baking dish, buttered. I've got 1 pound of cooked pasta. This is cavatappi, which is a shape I kind of like. You know, elbows is traditional, but you know, I like these. And I always like ridged pasta for the texture. I've got 4 cups of grated or shredded cheddar cheese. This is extra sharp cheddar. You know, a lot of times you can mix your cheeses, do whatever you like. I like cheddar cheese. All cheddar cheese is sharp as it can be. I know when my mother used to make this recipe, I think she used to use half cheddar and half American, because American is a better melting cheese. You could use half cheddar, half Gruyere. You can really use any mix of cheeses that you like, but you really need some cheeses that melt, so nothing too hard like you know, no Parmesan Reggiano or anything like that. Then I got a cup of breadcrumbs. It sounds like our butter is basically ready to go over here, almost melted. We're gonna add our flour to make our roux. And really what you wanna do now is you just wanna, when you're doing this, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a sauce called a bechamel, which is a white sauce. And you start with a roux, mix the flour into the fat. And what you're gonna do is you just wanna really cook this long enough that you're getting the raw taste off of the flour. And the longer you cook your roux, the more brown it's gonna get and kind of like a nutty toasted flavor. We don't really want much of that for macaroni and cheese, but if you were making something like gumbo, for instance, you might cook this for as long as, you know, 10 or 20 minutes and get it nice and dark brown before you were ready to keep going. Build that base of flavor. So just gonna let that kind of go. You can see the fat sizzling around the flour there. So like I said, there's nothing healthy about this recipe. It is delicious, it's extremely rich. So what I've got over here is I've got 2 cups of heavy cream and 2 cups of milk. And so 4 cups total of dairy. We're gonna slowly add in a slow stream while we keep whisking. And now the idea here is to keep whisking and not let lumps form. So I've got this on like medium heat. Mix that up. Sometimes I have somebody help me do this part. See if I can get an assistant over here. Sure. Just gonna slowly add the liquid, keep whisking. Now what's gonna happen is this roux that we made is gonna thicken our bechamel sauce. You're gonna get this nice, thick, kind of luscious sauce that you're gonna melt the cheese into. And this bechamel is kind of a base
sauce that you can build a lot of things off of. You can add a lot of different kinds of flavors to this. We're not really going to do anything other than the salt and pepper that's in the flour and the cheese. Sometimes you see things like, you know, dried mustard powder in a macaroni and cheese, you know, bechamel, or even a little bit of nutmeg. The first time I ever tried to make macaroni and cheese, I think I was maybe in middle school, and I remember being home by myself, and I boiled a pound of macaroni, and I drained it, and then I just threw some cheddar cheese into it and tried to stir it up, and you know, the cheese didn't melt very well, and it definitely was not creamy macaroni and cheese. And the step I was clearly missing there was this bechamel sauce. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just keep whisking this, and as this starts to come to a boil, it's going to thicken up. So it's been about 5 minutes, and this kind of came to a boil, and I lowered the heat to, you know, like medium low, and you can see how it's gotten much thicker. See how it coats the whisk, really kind of like a velvety smooth. And so this is our bechamel sauce, and to this we're going to slowly start to add our cheddar cheese, so kind of just like a handful at a time. And what you're going to do now is just stir it in. You know, once it all melts, you add another handful. So really, with something like cheddar cheese, it's like almost impossible to make macaroni and cheese with cheddar cheese without doing a sauce like this, because the cheese just starts to, when you melt it, especially something like cheddar, it really starts to separate. It gets oily. So in order to maintain the creaminess, the sauce is really kind of essential. And then so this, you know, is a baked macaroni and cheese. So, I mean, really, you could just make this cheese sauce, put it over some cooked pasta, and eat it just like that. It'll be super creamy and delicious. But this recipe, we're actually gonna, once we mix the macaroni with the sauce, we're gonna bake it. And that really gives the opportunity for that pasta to kind of absorb some of the sauce, kind of meld all together and really get delicious. Put the rest of the cheese in there. It's been probably a total of about 10 minutes worth of time. And so I'm just going to cook this for a couple of more minutes. Just keep whisking it until all the cheese is melted. Maybe give it like 2 or 3 minutes beyond that, whisking all the time, and then we'll be back to assemble the dish. Okay, so it's been about 3 more minutes. Our sauce is like looking great, ready to go. And if you look at this, it's like super velvety. All the cheese is melted, looks really good, smells really good. I'm sure it tastes really good. Don't stick your finger in there because it's really hot. Of molten cheese on your finger. And I'm just gonna, I got a pound again of cooked, pasta's already cooked al dente. You don't want to cook this to mush because it's now gonna bake for 20 minutes, and nobody likes mushy pasta. Well, I don't like mushy pasta. And just mix the sauce. I mean, so you look in there, in addition to a pound of pasta, you've got a full 4 cups of cheese, 2 full cups of heavy cream, and 2 cups of milk, and 1 whole stick of butter. So again, you know, it's really hard to not make something delicious with those ingredients. So get that coated good. Now we're just gonna put it all into our buttered dish here. We've already got prepared. And again, this is like a 9 by 13. If you were gonna, this is actually double the recipe. If you were gonna make it a single recipe of this, you'd probably use an 8 by 8, half a pound of pasta, which is easily enough to feed 4 people. This amount, you know, can easily feed 8. It's super, super rich. Put it in there. All right. We're gonna add our breadcrumbs, a cup of breadcrumbs. These are just panko, plain, unseasoned. And you could season them however you want. Give it a nice crispy topping, some good texture to contrast that super creamy, kind of unctuous macaroni and cheese. And now the recipe calls for buttered breadcrumbs, so you could just dot some butter on top, but I feel like there's already really enough butter in there, so I'm just going to spray it with a little bit of, this is grapeseed oil. This will just help those breadcrumbs to get crispy on the top. And then we're going to go into a 400-degree oven for about 20 minutes, or until it starts to get brown on the top and bubble up. Put that in there. And there we go. We'll come back in about 20 minutes. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes, and let's see how we're looking. All right. Yeah, so you can see, nice and brown on the top. The cheese is clearly bubbling. That is ready to go. Take that out. All right, so we're ready to serve this up. It's like hot, hot, hot. I wanna wait a minute. I'm gonna eat this. Some dishes. Nice little portion there, and you can see how like just creamy this really is. Really delicious. And I made to go with it, I've got some roasted Brussels sprouts. Nice little side for mac and cheese. And actually, something else that's kind of, this is a really rich macaroni and cheese, and something that actually my brother-in-law kind of likes, and we all laughed at him at first, was he always wanted a little barbecue sauce with his macaroni and cheese. And you know, then when I thought about it a little bit more, it really makes sense. Macaroni and cheese is kind of a classic barbecue side, and even though, you know, some barbecue technically you don't have this barbecue sauce, they do actually really go well together. So the sweetness of the barbecue sauce really kind of cuts the fat. So see here, it's really hot. I'm gonna taste it anyway. Oh yeah, it's really good. I'm gonna try a little bit of the barbecue. Delicious. So certainly not as easy as opening a box, but you know, Fannie Farmer mac and cheese is pretty much, you know, a lot of people regard it as the single best macaroni and cheese recipe. It's been around since the 40s. It doesn't get any more classic than that when it comes to comfort food. So make some macaroni and cheese and everyone's gonna love you.